thank you so much. This is a great place to be, in historic South Carolina. I've been here a few times before. As I was talking earlier, I've never been to Charleston, so I'm going to have to go try that sometime. I might have to have you take me for a tour around here, Sheriff, so I can get the good tour. I know a lot of things are going on. I don't mind that the crowd is a little bit sparse because of everything going on with the election and Tea Party rallies and other stuff going on this weekend. I know that we can save our country without a lot of numbers. The Founding Fathers didn't worry about numbers when they started the Revolutionary War. In fact, I read the book about John Adams, written by David McCullough. And John Adams said in his memoirs that a third of the people supported the Revolutionary War. A third of the people couldn't care less. Does that sound familiar? A little bit of apathy, perhaps? And the other third, were on the side of the other side. So a lot of their neighbors were fighting against us. So in the Revolutionary War, you had not just the Benedict Arnolds that were traitors, but sometimes your very next door neighbor or people in your own family were stayed on the side of King George III. So when you look at all that, it doesn't make it look so bad what we're doing today sometimes, with the apathy and the people that want to continue to support the socialistic agenda of Washington, D.C. politics. So we can win this, we will win this, and we just got to keep the faith. And we cannot wonder, a lot of people have come up to me and said, well, can we really win this? Well, they asked the same thing, and John Quincy Adams responded with 6 words, and it's the same today, the same answer. I'll tell you the same thing. Duty is ours, results are God's. So we just have to keep doing our duty. As Americans, as Christians, we have a duty to continue to fight and stand for our country and what's right. That's it. That's all we have to worry about. And then the miracles happen when we do that. But when you're just sitting around moping and wondering and always complaining and whining, like most voters do, and if you think we're going to save our country because we vote every election, then you're wrong. We've got to do a lot more than that. And what did Thomas Jefferson say? The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. That means every day we have to be vigilant, we have to be watching. And the mistake that we made was also something that Jefferson warned us to never do. And that is trust our politicians. And we did. We trusted government for far too long. And when we finally got back in the game, they had already pretty much destroyed most of everything that was left in the Constitution. So we've got some work to do. We're going to be going over that, and hopefully we're going to see where some of the solutions are. In fact, the solution is South Carolina. The solution is Texas and Arizona. The solution is Georgia, Florida, and Maine, and Hawaii, and every state in between. The way we take America back is county by county, state by state, and individual officers within those counties and within those states. Recently, June of this year, a new decision came out on the issue of the 10th Amendment. Now, my case, as Jose was so eloquently stating, it was all based on the 10th Amendment. I sued the Clinton administration when I was a sheriff in Arizona on the issue of state sovereignty. And basically, I told the Clinton administration and the federal government, you can't tell me what to do. I don't work for you. You can't fire me. You can't hire me. And I don't have to listen to you. And we won on that very issue. And the decision went so much broader and further than I ever anticipated that I want to share that with all of you. And we're going to be going over that. And you're going to be seeing that in front of you as we go through this whole thing today. Now, the bottom line might be, and with all the groups that I speak to, I still ask them, who is it that is responsible to stand for freedom? Well, let's see. Only the president and the courts can do that. Only the Supreme Court is in charge of standing for freedom. In fact, if there's ever a problem, it all has to go to court, and whatever the courts say, that's it. So the Supreme Court is in charge of determining and interpreting what our Constitution means and what our individual freedom and rights are. Well, if you believe that, then that means you believe that America is a 9-member oligarchy. And the 9 kings of the Supreme Court get to dictate your lives to you. And if that's the case, then I would still tell all of the public officials then, I want a case that said that the states are sovereign and that we're not subject to federal direction. Okay, well, if you believe the Supreme Court, then you have to follow my case. It just so happens that the Supreme Court was simply talking about what the Constitution said and was doing their job. And that is enforcing the Constitution. That's all. Now there's three separate branches of government. We all know that. Judiciary, legislative, and executive. Your sheriff works for the executive branch. He's the executor of the law. And so, is it really true that the other two can tell him what to do? Does he work for them? Is he their employee? No, he works for the executive branch and he works for the people of his county. They're the ones that elect him. And so the federal government comes in and says to the sheriffs of this country, well, we got news for you. You're going to work for us now. And that's what they did when the Brady Bill came out. And that's when I objected. They said, you have to do what we say. I said, well, why? Just because you said so? You don't have any authority to tell me what to do. So therein lies the case. So one thing also, I hope all of you know, we're having a national convention on January 30th in just 2 weeks called the Constitutional Sheriff and Peace Officer Association. So we're having a national convention for constitutional sheriffs. And we've got county commissioners coming, and we've got sheriffs and peace officers, and even a few chiefs of police, which is exactly what we want. Because everybody in law enforcement, everybody in government, all of us, the people, we all have the same obligation to uphold and defend the United States Constitution. We have the same obligation to be an oath keeper. You know, we take an oath, and then we go, thank God we don't have to keep it. You know, all we have to do is go through the little ceremony of taking the oath, and thank goodness we don't have to keep it. And I say that because I'm pointing a finger at myself, because I was definitely in that same category. And it's something that I had to repent for, and I did. And it changed my life when I did that. And that was way back when I was a rookie cop in Provo, Utah. Rookie cop, and I decided that something was wrong. Well, real quickly, while I'm here, I want to make sure that each of you know and understand the books that I have out there, because I hope that you'll purchase these and use them as tools. Now, this is the book, The Proper Role of Law Enforcement. I wrote this about 1999. And there was simply a lot of things that I had to get off my chest that I felt were going wrong in government, and especially that we do wrong in law enforcement. And one of them is ticket writing. Now, I'm not saying that all tickets are bad. I'm just saying if we followed the Constitution, we would write far fewer tickets. And I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say we would write about 90% fewer tickets if we were strictly following the Constitution. Okay? And along that line, I really pray for the day when our law enforcement community, especially our officers, all of them, will be as nitpicky about enforcing the Bill of Rights as they are about traffic laws. If that happens, we're gonna get our freedom back tomorrow. And that's the truth, we will. But I also called ticket writing, and I came up with that name specifically for this little book. And I call ticket writing taxation through citation. And we bring in about $7 billion a year nationwide in just radar tickets alone, radar speeding tickets, just those. And so I started asking myself, is that all proper? Is it also proper in law enforcement to conduct DUI checkpoints, and we usually do those on New Year's Eve? And so the Constitution says that we have to have probable cause before we can stop anybody. And then, funny thing, the Supreme Court turned right around though and said, but you can stop everybody randomly if you want to. What? Without probable cause. You can just have a checkpoint and just see if everybody's papers are in order. You can just see that. And then you can cite them and impound their vehicles if they're not. And so I started looking at that and I said, you know what? The Supreme Court has proved without any ambiguity that they don't always get things right. And certainly if you look at that very closely, you'll see that saying that a woman has a constitutional right to abort her baby, that there's a country that's based on protecting life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that somehow in that she has a constitutional right to end the life of a child before it's born. How far do we have to go before we realize we've gone too far? We're not in trouble because we follow the Constitution too strictly, are we? Now, and this book also details my conversion to the Constitution. And it was quite a process, let me tell you. It was absolutely amazing. I went through an epiphany, and I'm going to share a little bit of that with you today. And then this little book, this is just, again, this little pocket-sized book, you can keep this everywhere. This is actually a highlighted version of my Supreme Court victory. And you want to use this, you want to share this, you want to have everybody read this. The sheriff ought to take this and give this to all his county commissioners and to the county attorney and to the judges, and so that they can see that the United States Supreme Court actually ruled, and let me read this to you. We have held, however, that state legislatures are not subject to federal direction. And we're going to go over that. But so does that mean then, if your state legislature is not subject to federal direction, that your county legislature is? If your state legislature isn't, your county commissioners aren't. Your city council is not. And guess what? Even the school boards are not subject to federal direction. They are political subdivisions of the state. So are the counties. We are not subject to federal direction, which means they can't tell us what to do. Wouldn't you love for everybody to see that? Wouldn't you love for your state legislature to know that they're not subject to federal direction?
Yes.
The United States Supreme Court said it, not me. I'm just the messenger here. Don't shoot. I'm just the messenger, okay? Yeah, okay. And then, of course, the book that some of the sheriffs probably got tired of seeing, The County Sheriff, America's Last Hope. And I know this got sent around. I had a sheriff in California that said he got 7 of them. And I said, Sheriff, that means some of the citizens in your county are doing the job that they're supposed to be doing. And I said, just pass them around to other people in your department. He goes, well, that's what I've already done. And so every sheriff in this country should read this, but guess who else should read this? You. He works for you. And you want to know why the county sheriff is America's last hope. And if he's doing his job, he will be. And that's the amazing thing about this book. It is expanded. It's very positive that we can take America back, and we can do it in a peaceful manner. And if we get our sheriffs and local officials, and this isn't all just for sheriffs, but it's for anybody who's taken an oath of office. But the ultimate line in the sand in your county is definitely your sheriff. He is the one that will determine what is and what is not enforced in your county. It's called sheriff discretion. It's called the oath of office. And we have now sheriffs all across the country standing against some of the incursions of the federal government. I spoke at Elkhart County just Tuesday in Indiana. And the good sheriff there, Sheriff Brad Rogers, he's on our national board of directors with the CSPOA. He actually told the FDA that if they came on this Amish farmer's property again without probable cause or a search warrant, that he would arrest them for trespassing. And this sheriff meant it. And so then, I guess the FDA threw their popsicle down in the dirt and got all pouty about it, and they went and told on the sheriff. They tattletaled on him. Okay? And so some lawyer in Washington, Mr. Goldstein, wrote the sheriff a letter and said, if you interfere with the FDA, we will charge you with a felony. They said that to the sheriff. Well, the sheriff called me, and he told me about the letter. In fact, he emailed it to me, and I read it, and I kind of chuckled. And he said, Sheriff, I want you to know something. I'm not intimidated at all. And I said, great. I said, what do you want to do? And he said, help me write a response to them on this. So I did, and I sent it to him, and he put it together, and he sent it off to this attorney, I guess, from the Justice Department, wherever, from maybe just the FDA. And 3 days later, the Amish farmer got a certified letter from the FDA saying that everything against him had been dropped. Everything. Now imagine sheriffs like that doing those sort of things by the thousands, by the hundreds, all across America. There's 3,100 sheriffs about in this country. What if even just 500 of them? What's the percentage there? Maybe 25%? 20%? 530, that would be, yeah, okay, 18, 20% or so. What if we just had that many? 500 sheriffs standing against the incursions of the federal government. What would happen? We get our freedom back tomorrow. And this two things happen. The freedom movement and the Constitution remain intact, and it's effective. And it's peaceful, because he interposes on behalf of the people against tyranny and against stupid regulations and against stupid laws. And so a lot of the answers and a lot of those situations are in this book. And it's called, and this book just barely came out. I sent it to Ann while I was here because I hadn't even got it myself yet. The Magic of Gun Control just came out this week. And I spent the last year and a half on this book. And it's just an absolute wonderful book. And it comes up with a new term. We invented a new word. We can't wait for it to hit the dictionaries. We invented the word polymagician. And do you know what a polymagician is? It's a politician and an illusionist put together. Thus, a polymagician, because they want you to believe, no matter what you look at historically, and remember the warning from Ben Franklin, he who refuses to learn from history is doomed to repeat it. Well, that's especially with gun control, because they don't want you to look at the history of gun control. But if you do, they want you to believe that gun control in America is magic. It won't be for the same thing that it was used for all throughout history. Yeah, Hitler was a gun control fanatic. But it's okay. In America, it won't be bad. It's magic here. It'll never do now what it has always done. Enslaved, destroyed, and imprisoned, and completely support communist dictatorships. Stalin did it. Mussolini did it. Pol Pot did it. Fidel Castro did it. Any place where you have communist dictators, they believed in gun control. But it's okay to have it in America, because it's magic. And I offer the solution in here, and there's a lot of neat chapters in here that get into some of the things like Fast and Furious. Now that's what I call gun control. Just have the BATF send the guns down to Mexico and the cartels. And so, let's be real clear on that. I was on Judge Napolitano's show on Freedom Watch about that issue. And I told him on that show, and I'll tell it to you, it's the worst scandal in American history since the assassination of JFK.
Yes.
It is. It involves murder,
Yes.
conspiracy, perjury, and and treason. Yeah, and violation of international law, because Mexico was against this and didn't even know that they were doing it. And why did they do this? Why did they want to send guns down to the Mexican cartels and then make sure? Oh, that's another crime. They were accomplices to murder, which is also murder. But if you knowingly, Sheriff, if you knowingly pass guns to cartels that you know are going to use them in the commission of murder, that's murder. And then Agent Brian Terry was killed with these guns, who worked for the Border Patrol, and then, cover up, because then they tried to cover it up. And so now Eric Holder's sitting there trying to explain the whole thing, and he acts like it's been no big deal. Oh yeah, hundreds of people were killed by these guns, and we were just trying to do our jobs. Do you know the truth? Yes?
Sheriff Mack.
Yeah.
I talked to Trey Young last night up in Spartanburg. He and Jeff, the others, we're going after Eric before February. We're going after Eric, okay? So he assured me last night he's going to do something about Eric.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. Now go after his boss, too. Go after his boss. Because I'll tell you why they did this. They did Fast and Furious for one reason and one reason only. It was a backdoor approach to promote more gun control in America. Because they were going to prove that these guns came from Arizona gun shops. That's why they did it. And so they were going to find these guns down there and they go, oh, look at all the hundreds of people killed. And it was all because of these dadgum gun shows and gun shops in Arizona that there's not enough restrictions on these. And it was actually the gun shops that were bringing this to the attention of the authorities, and the authorities were ignoring them. And then Agent John Dotson of the Phoenix BATF actually said, he's the one that blew the whistle and told CBS News reporter Sharon Atkinson. And that's all documented in the book. Okay? So now we have all this criminal activity, and we're going to re-elect the guy that was in charge of all this. Okay? And I do believe we're going to re-elect this guy.
Yes.
I really do believe it. Now, do we have an obligation to elect anybody but him? and that's a compromise I'm willing to make this time. I'll support any Republican this time. I haven't always done that. But at this point, I would. I want to get rid of that criminal really bad. But anyway, we've got a lot of work to do. And the best place to concentrate on getting back our country is right here in your hometown. It's in your county. That's really where you want to concentrate. You want to work with your county commissioners, your sheriff, your city councils, and concentrate on freedom to where, again, we take back America, sheriff by sheriff, county by county, state by state. There is no hope in Washington, D.C. to restore freedom. Now, a lot of you support Ron Paul, and I do too. And Ron Paul is a friend of mine. And in fact, I've got his number right here on my cell phone. And I'm not in constant touch with him. I've spoken with him at public events maybe twice our entire lives. But asking Ron Paul to fix Washington, D.C. and a $16 trillion debt, which is actually about $90 trillion, is like asking Ron Paul to fill in the Grand Canyon with a shovel. It's too big for any one man. It's too big for him. This is an impossible debt that we have right now, that we owe to the Federal Reserve, who is supposed to be a branch of the federal government, but yet we're paying them all the debt. If they're us, why are we paying ourselves the debt? Because they're not us, and they're no more federal than flying to the moon. It's an international bank cartel, and that's what the Federal Reserve is. And if you really look into it, you'll see where Ron Paul is absolutely correct on that. And the bottom line is, even if you don't believe any of that, which is fine with me if you don't, but go ahead and look at it. In fact, there's a chapter in here dedicated to the Federal Reserve. And I call it green magic. And why is it green magic? Because they have taken money, they've taken gold and silver, and turned it into green paper, and made us all think that it has value. Is that not magic? Taking gold and silver, turning it green, and says, hey, this is value. But you know what? Since we've had the Federal Reserve since 1913, what has happened to our money? The power of the dollar, or the value of the dollar, has gone down 95%. And we'll tell them that they get to determine what our interest rates are. One guy, Ben Bernanke, gets to say what our interest rates are. He gets to say what your value of your dollar is. And he doesn't, and he's not even elected. And the United States Congress made a huge mistake doing that, and President Wilson made a huge mistake doing the Federal Reserve. And it's part of what's destroying America. And right now, those are the innocuous things. Those are the mild things that are happening in our country today. And what do we have right now? The United States Congress, a bunch of criminals in Washington, D.C., have voted and passed this thing called the NDAA. And now they have authorized, Republicans mostly, who have authorized the President of the United States, without any approval of Congress, to just simply, as Commander-in-Chief, use the military in America against American citizens. And so, if it's military, then you don't have to have trials or charges, and that they can just simply be put in one of the Gitmo camps until the war is over. And they want to do that in America because they don't trust us. I can't really come up with the reason yet. But I do know that there's a man by the name of Lamar Smith who helped champion this. And he lives in Texas in District 21, in my district. So a bunch of people from G-O-O-H, get out of our house, asked me to run against him. And I couldn't say no. And so I am. I'm running for United States Congress. And I'll tell you right now, I don't have time. But I'm going to do it anyway. Because I believe in our country and I believe in what's going on. And I told you, I still don't believe that there's an answer in Washington, D.C., and I still believe that. I'll go to Washington to try to strengthen state sovereignty, get the federal government out of our lives, and I really believe Rick Perry in this one. I really like what he says. Make the federal government as inconsequential in our lives as we possibly can. And that's what I'm going to try to do. But we can do that at every level, starting with the dog catcher all the way down to the president. Dog catcher, president. Yep, that's right. That's the right order. So they all take the same oath. They all take the same oath. Whether it's the dog catcher or the president, they all swear the same oath. Let's uphold and defend our Constitution. That is the only purpose that really matters in government today. Defending our Constitution and defending our freedoms. So who is responsible for doing that? We all are. And for any public official to say, no, I don't have the authority to keep my oath of office. What? I don't have the authority to stand for freedom. What? Of course you do. That's the only thing important about our jobs. Now, when we have our convention in Las Vegas on January 30th, we're going to make sure that all the attendees answer 3 little questions. They're going to know the answer to 3 little questions. What's the purpose of government? Why do we even have government? A lot of us don't even know. Where do we find in any of our foundational documents what's government for? What's the purpose of government? Okay, where do we see it? First of all, which document says what government's for? And don't say the Constitution, it's in the preamble. To form a more perfect union. No, that's not the purpose of government. Those are some of the side effects of what they wanted to have happen with the result of our Constitution. But it's in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, don't we? That all men are created equal. That we're endowed by our Creator. We hear all that stuff, don't we? Every 4th of July, every time there's a politician running for office again, every now and again when there's one of those poly magicians, that want to, sleight of hand and make us think that they're really meaning this stuff when they're not. But it's the very next line. After we hear life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, it's the very next line. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. That almost sounds religious, doesn't it? Just because it is. The only reason we need government is to secure life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And when government itself destroys the pursuit of happiness, there's not a thing we can do about it, right? Just sit back and watch. Man, I wish the FDA wouldn't be attacking these guys. Man, I wish the IRS wouldn't destroy homes and families and bank accounts. Man, I wish the EPA would stop destroying people's property and destroying jobs and getting rid of the logging industry. And man, I wish the Endangered Species Act would stop turning off the water to the Klamath Falls Basin in Oregon, or to the San Joaquin Valley right now in California, where we get 50% of our fruits, vegetables, and nuts. The federal government has turned that off because it might be hurting the little sucker fish in that dam. You know? And people want to ask why I think that they're the enemy. Oh, but because we destroy all those jobs, we'll raise your taxes so we can put everybody on unemployment. Aren't we wonderful? Yeah. And for every dollar that we spend right now, we borrow 43 cents. It's not tax and spend that's killing our country. It's borrow and spend. And we literally are borrowing money from China so that we can give foreign aid to Egypt and Syria and El Salvador and Colombia and other countries, other third world countries. We are borrowing that money. And everybody sits back and says, everything's fine. We should raise taxes even more. Yeah. And people wonder why we object to this socialistic agenda. Because that's exactly what it is. And it's, yeah. Yeah. So anyway, we've got a lot to cover here today. And one other thing, though, we need to do, and I want to not forget the three things. First and foremost, you have to know what government is for. Okay? Easy, to secure freedom and rights. To protect God-given rights. Second, what's the purpose of the Constitution? To limit what government can do. The Constitution is specifically the parameters in which all government officials must behave. These are the guidelines. What did Jefferson call the Constitution? The chains by which all politicians would be bound. And now you hear the politicians in Washington, D.C. say they have no boundaries. They can do whatever they want. They have the supremacy clause. They have carte blanche. They can do whatever they want. Nobody can stop it. Do you know that if you ask anybody in Washington who or what is to determine how far your authority can go, they'll say, we are. The federal government gets to determine its own boundaries. Does that sound reasonable from them? It does, yeah. And then third, what is the purpose of the Bill of Rights? Where did the Bill of Rights come from? Why do we have the Bill of Rights? And why was there a few states that said we would not support the Constitution unless it has a Bill of Rights? One of the guys most adamant about that was Patrick Henry. And some of the other founding fathers, you know what they called him? They said, God, Patrick Henry, you're such a right-wing radical. What's the matter with you? Anybody in here ever get called that? Yeah. You people that hang on to your guns and Bibles, what's the matter with you? Okay? Yeah. Well, I do too. And I've been called a radical. And I've been called a radical quite a few times. And in fact, I have on my website and in my books, especially this one, well, all of them, that the greatest threat to our God-given constitutional American liberty is our own federal government. And believe me, I don't like saying that. I wish to God it wasn't true. But it is. And you can see it in everything they're doing today. And I just mentioned some of the things, and those are the innocuous things. Except for maybe the NDAA, that's, I never thought that would be passed. I can't believe that they would think it would be just simply okay to do that and expose themselves so drastically to all of us, that they're willing to do that. But we have the Patriot Act, NDAA, and now SOPA, where they want to regulate the internet. And it's just going to be one thing after another. Right now, we have the lowest rating of Congress in American history. Congressional approval rating is 9 or 10%. Barack Obama is 42. Those guys are almost 5 times lower than the president. And maybe it's because of NDAA. And even Barack Obama complained, said this law violates civil rights, but I'm going to sign it anyway. At least he said, yeah, it violates civil rights. Do you know who opposed the NDAA? Maxine Waters. Yeah, Maxine Waters and what's the guy from Massachusetts? The gay guy, the gay... yeah, Marty Frank. He opposed it. Yeah. And then the guy that used to be on Saturday Night Live from Minnesota, what's his name? Yeah, yeah. And he said it violated the Constitution. These liberal Democrats standing against it, and the only Republican really going after it were Rand and Ron Paul. You know? And it's so amazing. And that this is just fine. When we're trying to get government off our backs, they're giving it more power, including Republicans to Barack Obama to have the military used against you and me. So, if I go on a long vacation, you'll know I'm probably at Gitmo. You know? So, come and join me. Well, we have a good time. So the Bill of Rights, the purpose of the Bill of Rights was what? Well, New York, Rhode Island, and I think, was it North Carolina or South Carolina? About 5 states objected and said they wouldn't support the Constitution unless it had a Bill of Rights. And they said, okay, what do you want in the Bill of Rights? Well, the Bill of Rights was going to be something specifically known as the inviolables or the untouchables. These are the basic fundamental rights that government can never touch. You make a list and you look at that as politicians and say, we can't touch those. They're untouchable. And the Second Amendment's in there, and now we have 23,000 gun control laws in America. No kidding. Yeah. The Second, they don't get it. You say Congress shall make no law. They don't care. That doesn't apply to them. They'll do it anyway. So anyway, they came up with the Bill of Rights, and they said, okay, how many of all the abuses that King George III did do you want added to the Bill of Rights that he can never do again? You know how many they came up with? 189. And then they said, okay, look, let's dwindle. That's a little bit too much. You know, they don't believe in having bills that are 2,000 pages long. They wanted to keep it short, precise, and understandable. Okay, so they dwindled them down to 12. 12 basic fundamental principles of freedom and liberty that Congress, that government officials could never touch. Never think about legislating for, against, whatever. It's done. They're done. They can't touch these. And then the states ratified 10. And so let's review this real quickly. The purpose of government, number one, is to protect liberty. Individual rights. The purpose of government is to protect individual rights. That includes teachers, sheriffs, county reps, county commissioners, governors, president, U.S. senators, dog catchers, all of them. It's to secure and protect liberty of the individual. Okay? Second, the purpose of the Constitution is to limit and establish boundaries in which government must operate. And 3, the purpose of the Bill of Rights is to establish principles that are absolutely untouchable. You can call the 10 Bill of Rights, the 10 amendments of the Bill of Rights, the untouchables. Okay? Because that's what they are. Government can't touch them. At least they're not supposed to. Okay? So when Congress has this rule and this parameter known as the very beginning of the Bill of Rights starts with, Congress shall make no law. So they can make no law regarding an establishment of religion, which they have done all the time. They can't make any laws about freedom of speech, freedom of religion, or freedom of the right of the people to peaceably assemble, freedom of the press, or to file grievances against government. They can't make any laws against those. All right? And yet, you can't even peaceably assemble without getting a permit from government. From government officials that already have sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution, that they would protect and defend these God-given rights, the untouchables. Okay? So we got some work to do. Now, if the federal government or any government therefore makes a law that infringes on your right to free speech or to peaceably assemble or the right to keep and bear arms, who would be required to stand against that? Well, it's us. Yeah. And how about all the officials who've sworn an oath? And I ask this to sheriffs all the time, and I know what your sheriff would say here. I know exactly what Sheriff White would say. If the federal government came into your county and wanted to confiscate guns and go door to door like they did in Katrina, when people need their guns the most, when there's turmoil and problems going on, and natural disasters and looting, they want to come in and take your guns away. There's no exception. There's no Katrina exception to the Second Amendment. But let's say they came in and said, Sheriff, we got too many people in your county that own guns. What are you going to tell them?
Get the hell out and own guns.
Yeah, that's right. And every sheriff I've asked that has said the same thing. Some sheriffs have said, I'd put my life on the line before I'd let the federal government do that. I put my job, career, my bag on the line. Just basically what Sheriff Mack said.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. But are there any other things that we should say the same thing to? Confiscation of property, confiscation of children, any of these abuses going on. And how about this thing with the, I hate to keep going, no, I love going back to this, it's a great story. Sheriff Rogers in Elkhart County, when he stood for the Amish farmer against the FDA, should we be doing that more? Here, the Amish are the most peaceful, loving Christian people on the face of the planet. They have a rule against doing anything violent at all. They won't. They're very forgiving. They live their religion, and they want to be left alone. And just because he won't pasteurize his milk, he's threatened with a SWAT team. SWAT teams have entered some of these places. Some of the Amish are actually going to jail because they won't pasteurize their milk. They don't believe in pasteurizing their milk. Who cares? And you know what? I'll drink their milk every day.
Right.
And I don't even like milk. So if you want to see me drinking milk with an Amish farmer, well, his name is Vernon Hirschberger, and I did that at the state capitol steps in Madison, Wisconsin, almost a year ago. And Vernon Hirschberger is a great man. He's got 9 kids. And the kids all watched as the state government, not the feds, but the state government came in and destroyed all their products. Hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of milk and cheese, cottage cheese, butter, destroyed it all because it wasn't pasteurized. I've eaten those products from him, especially his ice cream. It's fantastic. And at our Constitutional Sheriff Convention in Vegas on the 30th, I was trying to get the Amish to bring in ice cream for dessert. And if I want, as part of my pursuit of happiness, to go buy those products and consume those products, that's up to me.
Yes.
That's up to me. It's not up to government. And if I don't want to, then I'll go to the store and buy the crap that they pasteurize that is not good for you. Okay? But if we really believe in the pursuit of happiness in America, then would we allow an Amish farmer who owns his own land, owns the grass, they're only grass-fed cows, they don't feed them anything else, there's no pesticides used, grass-fed cows, which give milk naturally, and he puts that in a jar and wants to sell it to Patricia. And we send him to jail for that. Now, is that the most absurd thing you've ever heard? And that's why Sheriff Rogers said, you're going to leave that man alone. And I don't use his products, and I've never met this man before, but he's a constituent of mine, and I'm going to keep my oath, and you're going to leave him the heck alone, or we're going to have trouble. And I might just give you a free night hotel stay in the Elkhart County Hotel. And so, yes, that is the answer. And that is the solution to what's going on in America today. And we make these bureaucracies of Washington, D.C. that believe their regulations supersede the Constitution. And they believe that their regulations supersede the Bill of Rights. And they believe that their regulations supersede the principles of the Declaration of Independence, where it says we will protect the pursuit of happiness and his property.
That's right.
Oh no. Only if the judges say so, right? And we have freedom in America only if the judges say so, or if the bureaucracy say so. And now we need somebody else coming back and saying, you guys are the ones that have no say so.
That's right.
And you tell them, just what I heard here. You tell them to get out. And if they don't, you charge them to trespass. Now, we're going to go over some things here that back all of this up. Now, when we sued the federal government, the sheriffs that sued, when I sued, I said they could not tell me what to do. And I said, it has to be because of this. Now, when I decided to sue, the BATF actually showed up at a meeting of sheriffs in Arizona, in Phoenix, where we were having our State Sheriff's Association meeting. And there's only 15 counties in Arizona. We don't know why you other states have to have so many counties. But anyway, there's only 15 in Arizona. 12 sheriffs were at this meeting. 3 didn't show up. And there's 3 strangers in the room. Now, we go, what? And so I looked at the agenda, and they were first on the list. We never got to another agenda item that day because the BATF was first. And they came in, and they handed us each a document. And they said, sheriffs, this document details what you have to do in order to comply with the Brady Bill. We're going, what? Really? Yeah, and then they started reading us some parts in it, and they said, oh, and by the way, you have to provide all the money and resources to do these criminal and mental history background checks on anybody in your county who wishes to purchase a handgun. A handgun. So anybody goes into a gun shop in Graham County, Arizona, the gun shop owner has to forward their identification to me. I have to do all these background checks, provide for the files and everything else, and we're not even allowed to search mental history backgrounds. But I have to do an impossible search, and if I don't do it, I'm subject to arrest. Now, I don't make this stuff up. I'm going to show you as we get going here that literally the Brady Bill had a provision that if we failed to comply, we were subject to a year in jail. Sheriffs! So again, remember, on the Brady Bill, there was no negotiation. There was no contract. They didn't come in and say, hey, we'd really like you guys to do this for us, and we'll pay you this amount of money or whatever. Well, I wouldn't have done it if they even had done that, but they still didn't try. They just come in and commandeer our office for federal bidding, forcing us to participate in a federal gun control scheme, and then tell us we have to pay for the whole thing, and if we don't, we go to jail. Sound reasonable? No, not hardly. And only 7 sheriffs joined this lawsuit. 7 out of 3,100. Yeah, can you believe that? Yeah. And so, and now that we did this, I still get people telling me I'm crazy. I would say maybe the opposite is true. Sitting back and watching this happen and doing nothing about it. That's crazy.
Right.
All right. So after this meeting, all the sheriffs were just as ticked off as you could possibly imagine. I mean, you wouldn't believe the cussing that happened. And it started before these guys left the room, and the 3 BATF agents kind of tiptoe out and said, well, okay, thanks, we'll see you. You got your documents. And they were just the messengers too. So we didn't shoot them, even though we wanted to. So they were the messengers, and so they left, and all the sheriffs were saying, you would believe the cussing. And it wasn't just coming from me. In fact, I was the youngest sheriff in the state at the time. I was being pretty quiet. And I was listening to these other sheriffs saying, yeah, we don't have to do this. They're not our boss. They can't tell us what to do. And these blankety-blank arrogant guys from Washington, D.C. try to come in here and tell us what to do. Okay. So then we talked about that for like 6 hours. And then the cussing waned, and the emotions waned, and the president of the association says, okay, I want to hear from each sheriff. What do you want to do? Almost every one of them. Well, You can't fight City Hall.
Oh,
Who wants you to believe that? City Hall, of course. Especially the one in Washington, D.C. They don't want you peasants thinking you can do anything with those pitchforks. Okay? So, everyone acquiesced. And I was the last one. And I said, Sheriff, you already convinced me that we can't do this. I totally believed you guys this morning and this afternoon when you were talking about how we shouldn't do this. We shouldn't go along. All I can tell you is, I'm totally convinced I will not go along. And I thought I was going to get, yeah, come on, let's join this kid that said that. You know, let's join the young sheriff. Nothing. They all kind of just looked at me. And now I was pretty upset. And I have a 3-hour drive home. And I'm brooding about this the whole time. Kind of mad at the other sheriffs and mad at this whole situation and wondering what I'm going to do to not comply. And so I said, well, I'm not going to quit my job and I'm not going to comply. So I said, well, what am I going to do then? So by the time I drove up in my driveway, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm going to sue my own government.
there you go.
I'm going to sue the federal government.
Yes.
I'm going to sue the Clinton administration. Oh man, I'm so happy. I get to sue the Clintons. Nothing ever happens to the people that do that. It's fine. They love it, you know. So I'm scared to death. I'm scared. But I knew I was going to do it. But I still have one other thing to do. I have to go in the house and tell my wife. Now that is a scary proposition. And so what am I going to do to tell her? And so I'm just really nervous about this. I'm really preoccupied. I go in the house, and there she is, and she's going to give me a big hug and kiss, and because I haven't been home for a day and a half. We've now been married 36 years, and I still can't believe that she did this. I go right up to her, and she comes to hug me, and I just go, I'm going to sue the federal government, I'm going to sue the Clinton administration, they're going to squash me like a pumpkin seed, and I hope you don't mind. And of course, ladies, you can imagine, you know, how you would be reacting at that point. You know what? Well, don't I get a kiss? So I gave her a kiss, and I said, but I'm serious. The federal government's forcing me to be part of their gun control scheme, and this is part of the Brady bill, and I'm not going to do it. I can't do it, and it's going to cost us everything. Home, career, job, moving. And being told that, this is what this beautiful little blonde girl told me. She said, well, as I recall, we weren't really looking for a job when we landed this one. And then she went on to say, anyway, maybe this is why you're supposed to be sheriff. And so I said, okay, I'm going to take that as a yes. And she just kind of shrugged and went about what she was doing at 9 o'clock, 9:30 at night, probably just finishing putting the kids to bed or something. We had 5 kids. She didn't go, are you nuts? She didn't say anything negative, and she hasn't since then. And so the next day, any of you constitutional scholars want to tell me what I do now to file this lawsuit? You know, I didn't take Sue the Federal Government 101 in college. Maybe contact one of my friends. I know, go to the county attorney and say, I want to file this lawsuit. Yeah, the sheriff already shaking his head no. He knows absolutely that that would not be the answer.
That's right.
No way. The county would not want to get involved in that. So I never even did that. Never even thought about that one. That was, no, furthest thing from my mind. But I did think, should I call a lawyer downtown on Main Street? This is a small town. I knew most of them. Some of them are my friends. I'll call one of my buddy lawyers, right? You know what he's going to tell me? You got 20 grand? I'll file it in federal court for you, but sheriff, are you nuts? He's going to say exactly what the sheriff did say. You can't fight City Hall, sheriff. And so I'm just sitting there thinking about this, and I'm not a member of the NRA. I'm not a member of anything, JBS. I'm not a member of anything. And I just didn't join things. And I still don't join very many groups. I'm a member of Gun Owners of America. I think that's about it right now. And so I'm sitting there wondering, okay, how do I file a lawsuit against the federal government? And my undersheriff walks in. And I said, Mike, you're a lifetime member of the NRA, right? He goes, yeah. I said, do they have a number where you can call and get advice? I said, I need advice. So he gave me a number, and I called it, and I landed in the office of one Richard Gardner. And Gardner was a lawyer for the NRA. I told him who I was, what I wanted to do, and he said, Sheriff, we've already been preparing the paperwork on this case, and we've been praying that you would call.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I said, pay dirt. And I told him that I wanted my own lawyer on this, and he said, that's fine, we'll work with your lawyer, because I didn't really want this just to be, you know, like the NRA case. And they're offering to pay for the whole thing and have their lawyers get started on it. In fact, they already are. And I said, well, we're going to sue on the Second Amendment, right? And he goes, no, we're suing on the 10th Amendment. And I said, states' rights? He says, yeah, we don't have standing on the Second Amendment, neither do you. And I said, states' rights? He goes, yeah. He said, the federal government can't tell you what to do. And I said, even better. Let's get them. So you need to know there's something that's pretty touching about this now. They recommended a lawyer for me to get in Tucson, which is about 2 hours from where I was sheriff. I called this Dave Hardy, and Hardy, I hired him personally, and he, along with the NRA lawyers, filed in federal district court in Tucson, Arizona, on February 28, 1994, the very day the Brady Bill took effect, Mack versus U.S. And this was within the courtroom, federal district court, in the courtroom of one Judge John M. Roll. You see, he was the judge that was killed a year ago, January 8th, in Tucson, Arizona at the Safeway Shopping Center by this lunatic. Judge Roll was the judge who heard this case. He was my judge on this. I would have never made it without him. This would have never gone to the Supreme Court without him. And he was such a principled judge and a principled man that there is a chapter dedicated to him in this book. You see, he was kind of anti-establishment. He was kind of anti-mainstream. And if you think that we're going to fix anything by staying within the mainstream, you're crazy. Okay? And that's why I always get tickled when I see the press saying how Ron Paul is not mainstream, and like that's something bad. That's not bad, you idiots. The media, that's who I have to call idiots every day. Except I don't think they're idiots. I think they're cunning as heck. And they know how to make sure that they manipulate the races and they pick whoever they want. But regardless of that too, we had a long road ahead of us. And so 6 other sheriffs, excuse me, 6 other sheriffs joined the lawsuit. Yeah, some water if I can get that. 6 other sheriffs joined the lawsuit, and all of us won at the federal district court level except the sheriff from Texas. Now there's 254 sheriffs in Texas, and only 1 joined the lawsuit, and Sheriff Coog was the only one that lost. How do you lose a states' rights, gun rights case in Texas? He must have had the judge that moved in from Chicago. So anyway, he lost. But Sheriff Prince and I from Montana were consolidated into the same case, and we went to the circuit court on appeals, and we lost. We got overturned. Why? Because that's in San Francisco. It's the 9th Circuit Court, and they're the most liberal court in America and the most overturned court in America, right? But Sheriff Coog made a huge comeback with Sheriff Romero from Louisiana in the 5th Circuit Court, and they won. Big, just the opposite of the ruling from San Francisco. In fact, they even shook their fingers and criticized the 9th Circuit Court. And so now my lawyer said, this will pretty much guarantee us a trip to the Supreme Court, because we have 2 circuit courts conflicting on the same issue. And sure enough, on December 4th, 1996, Sheriff Prince and I entered the United States Supreme Court. And let me tell you, for this little small town sheriff, it was awesome. And all of you know the Brady Bill was named for James Brady, who was the press secretary for Ronald Reagan. And he was shot and got it the worst during the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan by Hinckley. So while we were at the Supreme Court, just a few rows over from me was James Brady in his wheelchair. And I went over and shook his hand. And I'll never forget what he told me. He said, "Sheriff, I really admire what you have done." Now, his wife didn't always say that to me. In fact, she never said that to me. I debated her several times on this issue on national television, Good Morning America in particular, a couple of times, and on the Phil Donahue show. I thought her husband was a very gracious person and an admirable person, an honorable person, but I will not say that about Sarah Brady. No, she exploited this and exploited her husband, and he would have never done this, but she did. So anyway, the Brady bill continued on after that, and when we were at court, at the Supreme Court, I thought we were going to lose. But when the attorney for the federal government got up, I thought we were going to win, because the justices just kept throwing spears at him, really attacking him on these issues of states' rights and state sovereignty, and that how could they have the authority to commandeer the office, and how could they force me to participate in something that I didn't want to participate in. And so it was going really well. And after we were finished, it was 1 hour, it's a 1 hour hearing, I thought we were going to win for sure. And sure enough, June 27, 1997, the United States Supreme Court, in a 5-4 split, if we had lost one more judge, we would have lost. But in a 5-4 split, we won. And they ruled that the Brady bill did indeed violate the Constitution. Most of you don't know this, but because of this lawsuit, primarily mostly because of this lawsuit, Brady bills 2, 3, 4, and 5 died. There were 5 Brady bills scheduled for your gun control enjoyment. And you know where this issue about serializing ammunition and restricting ammunition? It came from the Brady bill. Brady Bill 2 was all about putting serial numbers on ammo and making, having to register ammo, just like guns. And so Howard Metzenbaum actually introduced Brady Bill 2 just 2 weeks after he filed the lawsuit, and it never got out of committee. And then 3, 4, and 5 never came up, and the Brady Bill movement died because 2 small town sheriffs took a case all the way to the Supreme Court and won. Now, are we ready to roll on that? Okay. So the next one. Right here. I can't see this very good. I might mess up some of the filming a little bit here. Okay, right arrow. Where's my tech guy? Okay, hit right arrow again. No, okay, right arrow. There we go, play that one. Okay, we got that sound. It should be in the earpiece, the first one, in the computer. The sound earpiece should be in the first one. There we go. Turn up a little.
That you thought was wonderful. And then see this. I'm afraid if I dig any deeper, it's like what I find. You took the oath. If you recall, when you first came to work for me, and I don't mean to the National Security Advisor of the United States. I mean to his boss. And I don't mean the president. He gave you word to his boss. You gave your word to the people of the United States. Your word is who you are.
This is amazing. This is a movie called Clear and Present Danger. The only place place I've ever heard the oath of office talked about. In 20 years of law enforcement, I never heard about it unless I said it. Nobody else talked about it. And it happened to me too. When I first took the oath, it didn't mean anything to me. I took an oath so that I could get a job in law enforcement, so I could have a fun job, get a paycheck for driving cars as fast as I wanted. You know? And that brings up another subject. 99% of the time, we don't write tickets to each other, so we don't have to worry about our speed. We just write tickets to the peasants. Okay? Now, this was so amazing, though. He gave, your word is who you are. That's the oath of office. And my question still is this, to everyone who takes the oath. How do you fulfill that oath? Well, I maintain that is an absolute impossibility if you've never read it. If you've never read the Constitution, it is impossible to uphold and defend it. And does the oath really say this? I, Officer Smith, promise and affirm that I will write as many tickets as I can. I'll stop all the drugs I can. I'll run all the DUI checkpoints I can and do whatever my chief and sergeant tell me. That's what they do. That's basically what they do. But the oath is, I, Richard I. Mack, solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully uphold, defend, and obey the United States Constitution and the Constitution of Arizona, and will faithfully execute my office as a police officer, okay, or office of sheriff, or my duties as sheriff. Okay, that's it. That's the oath. To whom do I owe its fulfillment, and how do I fulfill that oath? First, I owe it to the God whose name I quoted at the end. So help me God. Second, I owe it to the people who pay my salary, the taxpayers. And third, I owe it to me. After that, I don't owe it to the sheriff. The sheriff is my supervisor, okay? But he cannot tell me to violate the Constitution. He cannot tell me to violate my oath of office, okay? He can't. And so, and do I have any obligation to do anything that's unconstitutional? Quite the contrary. I promised in God's name that I would uphold and defend the Constitution. Ask a peace officer, ask your favorite peace officer how you keep that oath. Okay? Some of them will say, I do whatever my sergeant tells me. In other words, I just follow orders. That excuse didn't work at Nuremberg trials, and I don't think it'll work now either. You're not allowed to violate your oath, even if somebody else tells you to. Okay? First and foremost, it is impossible to keep your oath if you've never read the Constitution. So the first thing you have to do, study the Constitution. Find out what the intent of the Founding Fathers was when they said the right of the people to keep and bear arms should not be infringed. Oh, well, I left out the first half, didn't I? You're right, I did. It doesn't change it one iota. There's no contradiction in the Second Amendment. The militia is not the National Guard. It's not the Army, like my son's 8th grade government teacher tried to tell him. She tried to convince my son that the Second Amendment guaranteed the right of the people within the National Guard to keep and bear arms. Well, you have to lie or say that, or you can't support gun control in America, because it's magic, remember? You can't do that here. The polymagicians would get away with everything if that were the case. So why are they? They get away with it all the time. 23,000 gun control laws in America. Okay? It couldn't have been the National Guard, could it? It's even in this book. Why could it not be that we were trying to guarantee the right of the National Guard to keep and bear arms? Because it wasn't one. The National Guard was formed 103 years later. So, couldn't have been that. And if you look at history, and you look at how important it was that the militia was formed and formed properly, you have to look at Paul Revere's ride, don't you? Who did Paul Revere call out to come out and fight and stop the Redcoats? The Redcoats are coming, the Redcoats are coming. Who's that? He was calling out his neighbors. He called out the militia. Get your assault rifles out of your closets and come and help us fight the Redcoats. That's the militia. And well-regulated means well-trained and well-equipped. And why do they try to disarm the militia today? And why are they trying to get rid of sheriffs in Delaware and Connecticut and Massachusetts and Pennsylvania and Rhode Island and all these other places in the East? Because they don't want constitutionally elected officers
Right.
answering to the people.
Absolutely.
That's exactly right.